If we roll out AI in a way that causes mass AI psychosis, attachment disorders, psychotic breaks with reality, that's the whole thing of AI psychosis and psychotic breaks from AI, that's actually happening. And if the US beats China to rolling out AI in a way that causes mass psychosis, and China rolls out AI in a way that doesn't cause mass psychosis, who wins? Maybe we had a more powerful AI, but we deployed it in a way that we turned the gun around and we blew our own face up. This is the most powerful, inscrutable, uncontrollable technology we've ever invented. It is already demonstrating rogue sci-fi behaviors we thought only existed in movies. We're releasing it faster than we deployed any other technology in history, ones that we've already screwed up, and we're doing it under the maximum incentive to cut corners on safety. There's one obvious word for what we're doing right now, which is that this is insane, and we need to stop pretending that this is normal. This is not okay.
That's Tristan Harris, the man who called what social media was doing to us before anyone wanted to hear it. In this conversation, guys, he goes somewhere most people in his position will not go. The psychosis is already happening, the builders cannot sleep, and the thing that worries me most is what he says about the people who could stop this and why they are not stopping it. Listen to what he says about them.
Obviously, the current administration has set out a policy of just no guardrails, accelerate as fast as possible, because the biggest risk is China getting there first. But I think it's really important for people to just slow down and say, if you beat another country to a technology, but you govern that technology in a self-destructive way, or you don't govern that technology, like the US beat China to social media. Did that make us stronger or did it make us weaker?
I think it made us more powerful, but it made us, the whole population, less healthy. And
I mean,
yeah,
that's what I mean by the steroids and bigger muscles, but like brain failure, organ failure, lung failure.
Yeah,
it's
like, terrible.
It's terrible. We've turned our internals as a country into a dumpster fire. Culture, journalism, kids development, training, our long-term health as a civilization is like massively on the decline. And that's not me being a doomer. That's just trying to be honest and clear-eyed about the nature of what we're at. So the point is that the long-term competition is who's better at governing the transition to a world with AI. That's what you're actually in competition for. So for example, if we roll out AI in a way that causes mass AI psychosis, attachment disorders, psychotic breaks with reality, which by the way, we didn't talk about that. That's the whole thing of AI psychosis and psychotic breaks from AI. That's actually happening. And if the US beats China to rolling out AI in a way that causes mass psychosis, and China rolls out AI in a way that doesn't cause mass psychosis, who wins? Maybe we had a more powerful AI, but we deployed it in a way that we turned the gun around and we blew our own face up. So to the degree we're in a race for who's better at getting it right. Who's better at deploying it carefully in education? Who's better at deploying it carefully in our information environment so we don't have a world that doesn't believe anything is true? And one example of this is in China, I don't know if you know this, during final exam week, which is synchronized in the country. So in China, so they have one final exam week and it's synchronized the same week, as I understand it. And they actually turn off all the AI model features where you can take a photo of like your homework or your test and it'll do the test questions for you. And they do that because now students realize that even if they were cheating throughout the whole school year and not doing any of their homework, they can't depend on that during final exam week. And so that's actually kind of a smart policy because it means that they're rolling out AI in a way that students might use it to support their learning, but not to replace their learning. Whereas if we roll it out in a way that we're not conscious of those things, what's that going to look like 5-10 years from now?
The US won the social media race and used that win to produce the most anxious, most depressed generation in modern history. A 2023 Gallup study found global negative emotions hit record highs every single year since social media scaled at full speed. AI psychosis is not a future risk being speculated about. Researchers are already documenting users losing their grip on what is real after extended periods of AI companion use. Winning a race you run badly is not winning. Now listen.
How many years do we have before you're probably going to see mass job loss? If things continue on this crazy like insanity pace that we're on right now.
Erik Brynjolfsson's work on this most recently is that we're already seeing, I think it's a 13% job loss drop for, I believe it's entry-level white-collar work. So basically college entry-level work. There's a 13% drop in people's ability to find jobs. And that's already pretty significant. And by the way, it's important to name there are long-term consequences. Some people, I was at a dinner last night and people were like, oh, well, I think it's just going to take much longer for this to happen. But it's like, well, how much longer? It's like 5 years. Well, that's still unbelievably short timeline for a crazy transformation to our society. So think about like a law firm where you have the senior partners who are paid a really high rate And then you have all the paralegals and the lower level, entry level law students who just came out of law school and they work at the law firm. And they're also paid a much lower rate, but it's still a high rate. And now, rather than, paying your, paralegal and your legal assistant hundreds of dollars per hour to go off and do all this work over a week and come back with a legal analysis, ChatGPT 5 is actually really darn good at it. And now you don't have to hire those entry-level jobs. That's the first problem. Second problem is, how do you get to senior partners? You have lawyers that have to do a lifetime worth of law and get really good at it. Well, what happens when we don't get the intergenerational knowledge transmission because we're not hiring the young lawyers anymore? And so you don't get to have the training process so that young lawyers get to become senior lawyers. I just was last night here in New York and I met a lawyer who's now actually just doing DJing full time because he makes more money DJing than he does as doing entry-level law work. So it's not just this short-term risk of not finding jobs, it's the long-term risk of how our society and its expertise can be transmitted. And one thing that a civilization needs for long-term sustainability is intergenerational knowledge and wisdom transmission. And that requires real relationships, that requires real expertise, that requires these sort of exposure to the ineffable, extra dimensions of these different problems, the subtext to someone's body language when they're working through a problem. There's all these invisible cues that we get when we're working through things, and we need to have systems that are going to enable that.
A 13% drop in college-level entry jobs, and that is before the reasoning models and AI agents already rolling out across every major industry. The lawyer-turned-DJ feels like an isolated story until you multiply it across every field with a training pipeline. Medicine, engineering, finance, all of which need people doing the ground-level work before they become the experts who run things. Pull that bottom rung out and you do not just lose jobs, you lose how entire industries pass their knowledge to the next generation. Now listen.
So it's going to be hard to know how long jobs takes for different kinds of jobs. The point is that it's only moving in one direction right now. AI is the least powerful and least scary it will ever be, and least capable it will ever be. And it's getting rapidly more capable every few months. And people should be prepared for how do we navigate that transition. And people should frankly be outraged and tell their politicians this is a top tier issue. People should be writing their senators saying, you should vote in the next election based on whether your candidate is just accelerating AI recklessly. And there's a new $100 million super PAC by the AI accelerationists that are trying to fund just AI acceleration candidates. And by the way, they have a huge advantage because they have billions and trillions of dollars that they're invested in. They want to fund their ability to outcompete others in the race. We need to counter that. And there needs to be people who are willing to vote for the politicians saying, this is ridiculous. We should not be releasing inscrutable AIs, preying on our children, causing them to have attachment disorders, causing them to commit suicide, causing AI psychosis. We should not be releasing AIs that are replacing jobs faster than we have a transition plan. We should not be releasing AIs that, multiplied by surveillance, create whole new forms of AI surveillance we haven't talked about that erode privacy and freedom forever. We should not be releasing super intelligent AI systems that are more powerful than us and that we don't know how to control, that are going to outcompete us in everything. We cannot release those things. These are things we should all agree on. And all of this is just dependent on seeing clearly that the default path that we're currently going towards, if you just take the current incentives, is just not one that we want. And I almost want there to be just a single website that lets people just sort of mark their membership of, even if we don't know what the other path is yet, we need to be committed that we need to be in search of this other, we call the narrow path, and not allow this default, reckless, insane path to continue.
It's interesting in terms of the default, reckless path. I did an exercise, it was probably in May with ChatGPT, and I was at this for 4 hours, 5 hours. I was running through all these different scenarios. And after all this different modeling, it popped out this thing of basically it was saying that the most likely scenario would be that by 2027, in 2 years, you would have significant job loss. But by 2028, you would have a scenario potentially where you have people protesting in the streets that they're losing jobs and they're not actually being replaced. Was that
not being replaced meaning because they were successful in some way, or what do you mean?
Meaning they lost their job, but there's no job for them to step into.
Oh, yeah, exactly. There's no.
Is that?
People can become massage therapists for a while or become part of the caring economy. I think that there will be an incentive for people to move into things that are about human care, that are where people just want to interact with humans.
That's one thing I've been talking about, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not an expert on this, and this is a really hard problem, but the point is we're currently going faster than we'll be able to manage this transition. We should not have billions of jobs and livelihoods disrupted. It's not about protecting the jobs, by the way. A lot of people don't like their job, but we shouldn't have a billion livelihoods where you can't find a job, you have no way to put food on the table, and disrupt billions of people's livelihoods without a transition plan.
People in the streets by 2028 and no replacement job to walk into that came out of 5 hours of scenario modeling with the most advanced AI system currently available. The people funding the politicians who decide how this goes have already put $100 million on the table to make sure the acceleration candidates win those seats. The people most exposed to what is coming have almost no organized voice in that conversation, and most of them don't even know yet what is heading their way. Listen to this.
Sam Altman was on Tucker Carlson's show a few weeks ago. He said that he apparently hasn't gotten one good night of sleep since they've built like GPT over the past couple of years. Why do you feel like that is? So,
why is he not getting good sleep?
Yeah, really what I'm asking is, you've been in the room with a lot of these people. Like, is there a sincere like weight of like, holy shit, like what am I doing right now? What is the mentality of these people if he's saying he can't sleep?
I think there's a schisming happening. To be schismed is like your brain is like split in half, where every day, if you're a person who loves technology and you think, there's honestly just curiosity. Like, it's so cool. You build something and it can suddenly do law or math and create new physics, can prove new math theorems, invent new materials. AI in the last year created the first new antibiotic in 60 years. That's going to solve some problems. Your attention as someone who's building this, I think, can be seduced by the fact that I'm basically building a god that's read the whole internet and can reason at a superhuman level about a whole bunch of areas. And I can point my attention at that and just feel kind of excitement. But I also know, I signed a letter saying this could extinct humanity. And I think that people live in this kind of schismed state where it's overwhelming to think about the negative. I don't feel like I have agency because the only thing I can do is race, even though that's not true. And so I live in this kind of inner conflicted place where I'm not actually operating as a holistic person who's just in integrity with the facts of the situation. And I think that, Dario is someone who cares deeply about this and understands the race dynamics, but mostly feels powerless, as many of them do. There's this interesting thing where
they're building it and they feel powerless?
Yes.
They're going to be the one that's worth $10 billion company, $10 trillion company, and they feel powerless.
Yeah, because they feel that if they were to just stop it all, they don't know how they would stop the other guys. But have they even tried? Like, why aren't they just saying, if they all signed a letter saying, I'll stop if all the other ones stop, and I'll signal that I will stop if the other one, it's like Groupon. Remember Groupon? It's like, if you get like everybody buying, if you get like 100 people sign up for this concert, then we'll do it for this price.
That they would do that? That they would stop everybody else up?
No.
What, I mean.
And it's also like they say, well, we can't stop China. Well, did you try? Did you try? Did you use all of you're the most connected, wealthy, powerful person on earth. Like, if you're Elon Musk, you have more resources than God. You have the ability to reach anybody in the world who will respect you. I mean, he did warn about this verbally, but did you really just throw, if it really is the end of the world is the other side of this trade, that is one of the things you're trying to prevent, you would really try to throw everything at it. Have we really tried everything? How much time did you spend on it? And I don't mean this to go after Elon, I mean for any of these folks. Like, have you put all of yourself into trying to prevent this worst outcome?
Sam Altman signed a public letter calling AI an extinction-level risk on the same level as nuclear war, then walked back into the lab and kept building. Tristan's question is the one nobody in power wants to answer. If you have more money, more connections, and more influence than almost any human alive, and you genuinely believe this could end humanity, what does "I tried everything" actually look like? Because from where the rest of us are sitting, it looks like a letter, some congressional testimony, and then back to work the next morning. Listen to this.
There's a feeling among people building the tech that you're naive if you think you can stop it. If you think that there's anything that we can do, then you're not being in touch with the reality of the race, the money involved, the resources. But if you believe that it is inevitable, just notice, if you're sitting there and you're building AI, and the other guys are building AI, and you collectively believe this is inevitable, will it have any chance of not happening in the full expression of an AI maximalist way? You're co-casting a spell. You're creating a reality. And notice that saying it's inevitable, is that based on actual logic? Like, is it in the laws of physics that we have to roll out AI maximally and recklessly? If literally not a single person on Earth wanted this to happen because it was going to be bad, and everyone took their hands off the keyboards, does AI like still get pushed magically in the world? Is it summoned from somewhere? Like,
No.
No, it comes from humans that are caught not at the level of physics, but a kind of a social physics, like a kind of belief, arms race dynamic. I do believe that things look impossible until they actually happen. And there's this thing maybe just to say, which is I'm part of a community that will often reference this idea of called post-tragic hope. So there's pre-tragic hope, where it's kind of naive optimism. It's just like things are going to go well because I want them to be well, but it's not grounded in reality. Then there's tragedy, which is you're actually stuck in the tragic. So instead of being naively optimistic, you actually look at reality and then you just get stuck in depression, nihilism, or the tragedy. What often happens there is you either get stuck there or you bounce back into naive optimism because you just need to have a positive story to tell yourself. And I think that the culture that we need that can respond to this problem is fully being with the grief that we feel for the situation. If you can actually feel that, what you're connected to is the love that you have for the world that you want to continue. And then you can become what's called post-tragic optimism, or having post-tragic hope, where you act having fully metabolized our shadow and our confrontation with this situation. And then your actions are commensurate to that situation because you're actually coming from an embodied place of taking that situation seriously. And I know that that's actually a lot. And I think that people need support to go through this rite of passage, almost like this initiatory experience. But I think that if we hold each other in it, I do believe that it's possible. It's not outside the laws of physics for something else to happen. It would be unprecedented. It's extraordinarily difficult. But extraordinarily difficult is different than it's impossible and all of this is inevitable.
Tristan Harris didn't end this conversation with clean answers, and I don't think there are any. The builders feel trapped, the politicians are funded by the people racing fastest. The technology is already hurting people in ways we can actually measure right now. And the dominant belief inside the labs is that doom is locked in, which, if enough people accept it, is the thing that makes it true. But here's what I keep sitting with. 190 countries fixed the ozone hole in 2 years. They didn't wait for everyone to go blind first. They saw the evidence, believed it was real, and moved. The question with AI is whether we are willing to do something similar before the catastrophe rather than after it. The window is not closed yet. The next few years are going to determine a lot about what comes after them.